Okay, first question. Jack said we don't get in school today how to find meaning in our own life and select a direction. How will the Venus Project offer that we teach kids to find meaning in life and select a direction?
Well, that's a kind of a difficult question, but what we would do is have youngsters work together, and we'd assist them in setting up a government, a management system for the young people, and base it on physical correlation only. Physical correlation means that the rules of the game would have to correspond with reality. That is, our relationship to nature and one another. When you bring up children without myths, such as the Mickey Mouse Club and all the crap that we give children, we would stick with the physical basis of decision making, meaning how we relate to one another and the earth. Children will be trained or educated in understanding how nature works, what makes the wind, what makes the rain, evaporation. They'll be trained in the physical sciences or educated in the physical sciences. I don't like the word training. They'll be educated in the way nature works. Utilizing that system is really much more democratic than any laws made by man.
This person was asking if we could check out a website, which we didn't have time to do, that has proof or scientific evidence that the paranormal is real, irrefutable scientific evidence for the afterlife and paranormal. We didn't look at the website, so maybe we can check that out next week. You want to do that? Okay. What shall I do if a Venus Project activist friend of mine is engaged and is about to undergo marriage in the near future?
I don't think you ought to do anything about it. It's not that important.
Yeah, wish her well. How detailed is the blueprint of the Venus Project's circular city?
It's comprehensive enough to build a working system.
And we're also working on different models. We'll be doing different city designs other than what we have here, and working up more details with them, with Andrew and the design team. How does the importance of value shift within a person compare with the importance of spreading the word about the Venus Project?
I'm not sure the meaning of that question. I'm sorry.
Maybe we can just suppose understanding a new value system. How important is that before spreading the word?
It isn't a value system. The system has to correlate with the nature of the physical world. And if you study engineering, the engineering principles are related to what the engineer works on, whether it's aircraft, bridges, buildings. It has to correlate with the nature of the physical events. A value system is not a private way of thinking. The value system we encourage is one that's based upon the physical entities in the world and the problems that we face.
And that means applying science to behavior as well, which they don't really do today. Understanding why we behave the way we do, understanding that it's caused by our experiences, our education, our nutrition,
all the factors
our
that
environment.
Affect human behavior.
Right, our total environment. The Zeitgeist movement added the word model to the end of resource-based economy. Actually, I think they're calling it resource-based economic model. Okay, making it a resource-based economy model. I'm not sure if that's correct. I'm wondering how is the Zeitgeist movement description of a resource-based economic model differ from a resource-based economy?
Just a lot of words strung together, taking the same basis of social operation. I don't care what they call it. You can call it dollar, money, or you can call it anything you want to, but it still has a primary effect. I would say that changing the words doesn't change the operation of the resource-based economy.
How close are they to your resource-based economy?
They're not close at all. They juggle a lot of words around, but don't talk about the process level. The process level means precisely how does a resource-based economy operate? Who designs the cities? What's the basis of selecting cities? You have to go into all that detail. If you don't go into that detail, you have aberrant designs and variations in design which is not based on statistical mechanics as to the effectiveness of the design.
Yeah, this person is asking why the Venus Project is attempting to do a big budget movie. They're asking why not make a television series or something on YouTube. We are doing another film for an introduction to the Venus Project right now, which we will be giving away for free on YouTube, and we will be enabling people to download it for free and give it away in the streets or any place that they're talking about the Venus Project in lectures or exhibits or anything else. But we feel that the major film is very important to get to the general public. We'd be glad to do a TV series too if we have that opportunity, either one. So we are looking at all different options for that.
Thank you, Roxanne. That's well put.
This person's asking about the Venus Project plans. Will there be an amusement park?
Not an amusement park as such. We have a setup which will educate people through films. Since language is subject to interpretation, if you show a motion picture of what it is you're talking about, why the city is designed that way, and show films so that people can extract the same reference points that we use in suggesting the redesign of cities. In other words, if you use language alone, it's subject to interpretation. If you use visuals, the interpretation is closer.
I think this person might be talking about the theme park of the future that we talk about.
A theme park of the future is one that informs people as to how things work. Like Disney World is mostly entertainment. The Venus Project concept of a theme park is to educate people as to how the world operates around them, not the opinions of people.
How would a resource-based economy bring social peace and not cause greed?
Because we remove the mechanism that causes greed. That's scarcity, poverty, hunger, differential advantages. In other words, as long as those things exist, you're going to have trouble.
And money, yes. Why should everyone put their entire faith into a supercomputer?
Well, it seems that most people put their entire faith in electronic operated elevators, iPods, computers. They seem to be buying computers because they're much more reliable as far as information availability. Whereas information on the internet is the widest possible range of information you can get today. The information on the internet is the greatest liberator of human values. Of course, there are people trying to control the internet. They'd much rather have full control of the internet than let it go in the free direction that it's going. The direction that the internet is going in is a useful direction so that people can get a multiplicity of views from many different sides.
Do you think that the Venus Project is likely to succeed with the way we're operating now, as opposed to testing the resource-based economy locally or convincing people through direct proof instead of visual work of fiction?
Well, those are selective words designed to damage the system. When they propose a new airliner, they don't have any proof. They just use earlier statistics in the wing area and the basic design and the amount of weight to be carried. There's no proof that a bridge will hold up traffic, but when engineers design a bridge, they use beams and structural members that can carry the specified load. If you know the specified load and how many cars a day go over the bridge, what the weight of the tonnage is of the cars that go over the bridge, then you can design the bridge. That is your proof. Your proof is the knowledge you've accumulated prior to the construction of a bridge or building. How do you know the Empire State Building will stand up? They use standard methods of evaluation in structural systems. That's how they know.
I think this next question relates to that too. Does a resource-based economy work, and does the Venus Project have any base in reality?
It cannot operate any other way except basing it on reality.
As opposed to opinions and myths and
Yes.
what we have today.
May I add something to what you said before, Roxanne, concerning the proof of concept, so to say, and so on?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to say that I'm sure everyone in the Venus Project would be happy to build a proof of concept, so to say, but until now there's not the possibility to do it, and this is why I think everyone is here to let it happen, to make this proof of concept in the future, so to say. And yes, this would be my addition to this.
Absolutely, you're correct. Jacques and I have traveled all over the world meeting with people to try and actually build the city, and it just hasn't occurred yet for different reasons, but we're still trying to do that and still presenting it. We have somebody coming over today who's talking about a technical research center on sustainability and a kind of a university of sustainability that they want to do here in Florida, and they want, there's a possibility of Jacques designing it and being involved. So we're always working in that arena too. We're always trying to meet people to really do something, but we just don't have the funds right now. Somebody is asking about other countries like the Ukraine and Russia. They're quite well developed in eco-settlements, people who are going to build an entire village, trying to make all environmental way possible to add, let me see, a little science and values. Venus Project to build a prototype city. Well, this is the same type of thing. I don't know what these people are doing at the Ukraine and Russia. We'd be glad to speak with them.
We'd be glad to share ideas with them too.
This question, can you talk about some simple devices that make life easier? Things like photovoltaic cement, tiles that don't support microbial. Okay, so the question is, can you talk about some devices that can make life easier? Things like photovoltaic cement, tiles that don't support microbial life, etc.
No, because that would be giving out products for the monetary system to take patents out on. You see, if you give specific information on how to save energy, you're giving away a process level with other people can patent and prevent you from using it eventually. But I can give you a few ideas here in that area. Instead of having an air conditioner hanging out of windows on private buildings, you have an underground circulation of air and cooled air which you meter out to different buildings instead of an air conditioner hanging out of every window. Instead of having personal vehicles for every person, which is inefficient as hell, you have a transportation system built within the city that's designed to meet all the needs of moving people from area A to area B or area C. That can be done very easily. Imagine if everybody had their own elevator in a skyscraper. That's the way it is today with automobiles. You don't need everybody to have their own elevator. You need a system that will transfer people from one place to another with a maximum efficiency.
Would you ever consider doing a debate with politicians?
Well, I would consider it, but politicians do not have information. So I don't know how they can debate. They don't seem to know anything about technology, about transfer of energy. They don't seem to know about electrical losses in long transmission lines. They don't even know how to supply water or how to design buildings that are not subject to being flooded out or cave in an earthquake. Politicians don't seem to know anything. If you want to set up debate, it would be kind of foolish, because how can they debate a subject they know nothing about. Unless you're thinking of a particular subject, and I'd like to know what that is.
Do you need more architects, engineers contributing? And if so, how would I get them on board?
If they read our books, watch our videotapes, and decide to go along with it, you can't force anybody to do anything. You can merely present the concept. If they accept it, then they're on board.
If you know any scientists or engineers that are interested in the proposals of the Venus Project and would like to get involved with some of the projects, they can sign up at our global scientific and technical database on the website www.thevenusproject.com. Once they've signed up on the database, as and when certain projects become available, for example, we're currently working on a simulation of the Corson project, which will be used in our 3D simulations. That project involves many professions as well, software developers, software designers, systems analysts, etc., etc. We'll also be using lots of consultants in various areas such as energy distribution, things like this, to actually build up this simulation. And what we do is as and when specific roles are required, we contact those specific people on the database and offer them the chance to come and join and help contribute on the projects. So again, if you like, if you know anyone, or if you yourself are a scientist or technician in any of the technical fields, sign up on our database.
Okay, could we begin to connect? I guess they're talking about already small-scale communities to the Venus Project through having themselves sign up as a community that are willing to go through a transitional phase to a global resource-based economy, basically have the Venus Project as a gathering point for common intended communes. If there are any intentional communities that are interested in this direction, we would be glad to introduce them to the resource-based economy if they would like to work with us in some ways. And we would be glad to address different communities like that. But they would have to have some kind of interest in this as well. They're saying, okay, basically make it easier for communes to connect with us by having a network sign up for supporting communes willing to evolve to a global resource-based economy.
Yes, that's okay.
Sure. Where can I find the base of technology and development project Venus? I find out what developing and what now exists. Oh, where can you find out what's developing and what's existing, what's now existing? Through our books and videos and joining the design teams if you're an architect or engineer. What do you think about Jeremy Rifkin?
In what area? I think that his information that he gathered on technological unemployment was very good. He gives statistical numbers of the amount of people displaced by machines in various industries. The book is called End of Work by Jeremy Rifkin. It's written I think about 15 years ago, but it still holds true. The statistical data that he gives can be checked out.
He's talking about the empathic civilization, but I'm not aware of what that aspect of Jeremy Rifkin's book, work. I'm not aware of his recent work, if that's what he's talking about. You want to say that again?
I cannot evaluate empathic civilization. I don't have enough information on it.
If anyone has a copy of it, either in PDF or on video or anything, feel free to send it to Zach and Roxanne at tvp@thevenusproject.com. Okay, that's it for the questions. Jacques, do you want to talk about the resource-based economy a little bit before we've got sort of half an hour before the end of the sort of event?
Yes, there's a lot of language out there that I don't seem to be able to understand, and that is words that some people use. Is it from the bottom up or from the top down? How will the future be governed? Neither way, neither from the bottom up or the top down. Technological competence is the only thing we use. I don't know what from the bottom up means. Does the bottom up mean that the majority of people design bridges, do electrical engineering, or do engineers do that? It's always been from the top down. Top down meaning information. You can't build a dam unless you've built dams or have training in that area. I don't know what from the bottom up means. All that means that there may be so many millions of people that need water, and they need so much water, and that's up to an engineering team to design that. There's so many people that use transportation today. That takes an engineering team to design that type of transportation. I don't know what from the bottom up means, except the needs of people. Yes, all the designs of the future will be based upon meeting human needs. Unless you're talking about from the bottom up, you mean that the average person will participate in the design of highways, bridges, medical problems? No, not at all. You'd have to have people that have more statistical data and to not economic gain by their investments in the monetary system. All research would be slanted toward economic gain. In a resource-based economy, all research would be based upon elevating human beings to their highest potential.
Sorry, Jacques, just to cut in there, you had a good point there. I was wondering, could you talk a little bit about the level of contribution that the average person will have, from our system currently? Obviously, there's a varying level of where people are at in their understanding of how the world works, and also their level of education within this system. And many people are concerned that other people will have control over their lives and that they won't be able to contribute in any way. Could you just go over that a little bit, how you see the contribution in a resource-based economy?
I think I understand your question. When the average person wants a vehicle, they consult automotive engineers. If the average person wants a house, they consult architects. Unless the average person becomes a multidisciplinarian. If the average person learns how to find out what information is relevant, that which isn't, then they can make contributions. Until they find out how to utilize the scientific method, it's very difficult to make contributions without knowledge. I know that even the Wright brothers, of course, were not educated in aeronautics, they were self-educated, but if their values were not correct in relation to a flying machine, they could not build it. So they had to, through trial and error, learn the systems that made it possible to build a flying machine. And the average person, in order to make more contributions, will have to learn more about the scientific method, rather than their own personal opinions, which are based upon limited information.
But the thing about the resource-based economy is that people will have access to be able to learn those things and explore and experiment with things, and have people that will help them understand more complex systems better. They'll have much more range and opportunity.
And education will be based upon mostly hands-on learning. So you deal with the real problems, not some theoretical problems. You deal with real problems in education, and you work on methods of minimizing the expenditure of energy and offering maximum safety. If the public lacks information in certain areas, we have to make that information available in terms that the public can understand. That's why we use motion pictures, diagrams, physical displays to explain how decisions are arrived at. People arrive at decisions through experimentation. But when experimentation is not engaged in, it's very difficult to arrive at a more appropriate decision.
I want to go back to a question that I kind of passed over. Somebody was asking about the Zeitgeist Movement's new website and what we felt about, let's see, what is the particular question, number 8, what is the history of the Zeitgeist Movement and what is the difference with the Venus project. But did you want to say something with that? I'm going to mention something after. Go ahead.
I pointed out many, many times that the Zeitgeist movement pointed out many of the economic shortcomings of our system, which is very important. However, they did not point solutions, what to do about it. In other words, they said that the banks exploit people, that the Federal Reserve System is not a federal agency of the government. They pointed out the book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, which is all very useful, but without pointing out what to do about it, leaves people in midair until they discover the Venus Project. But I would say that Peter Joseph told me he works better alone. And he said he wanted to cooperate. Well, I don't know what that means. If you say, I work better alone, I can make a motion picture depicting the Venus Project. Without consulting the Venus Project, I don't know how we can do that. And that is not a cooperative system if a person says, I work better alone.
But I wanted to mention in that section, in that question, he says that the Venus Project operates as a think tank which develops and expresses the work of Jacques Fresco, specifically his vision and the future regarding physical design and social methods. He claims that it's mainly from the work of Jacques Fresco. Well, everything that the Zeitgeist movement talks about in regards to the future was also taken from the work of Jacques Fresco, but now they're putting another name on it, which I find kind of amazing. So, I don't know what they're talking about when they're saying it's just taken from one person. They did the same, this is how they took their work, everything they talk about, as I mentioned. Jacques worked in the past. He worked 75 years at accumulating information and was the first to put it all together through experimentation and working with kids and working with people to see if his direction and his conclusions were correct in terms of changing people and education. He infiltrated the Klan to see if his operations of being able to work with people would work. It could have backfired terribly, but it didn't. He worked in the technical field to back this up, to show what the environment would be like instead of just verbally what it would be like. Peter seems to think by talking this way, people would automatically come to these conclusions technically in design. It's not really the case. We have a lot of architects who have signed up, and I think Andrew can testify to this. They don't get that training in design that Jacques worked out over 70 years of design work towards a resource-based economy. It's not something that just comes about.
Roxanne, Sven's just going to do a little chat on the subject of open source and how it doesn't really apply to the Venus Project and why. I think this is quite an important question for sort of that people have, especially at the moment with open source really taking off due to the anger against the establishment and companies, etc. So.
Sure, that'd be great.
Well, okay, and I've seen it down in the chat as well as in my inbox. People are asking why the Venus Project is not going open source. There are actually several reasons for that. The most important one, in my understanding, is the idea of the Venus Project is the ultimate result of a long time of research that Roxanne already mentioned Jacques has been doing, and releasing something out into the open source community would lead to them adding their own ideas to the foundation and the thoughts behind the Venus Project. The thing is, the whole idea would become obfuscated. And within the open source community, there's a whole lot of contribution. So too many ideas were actually trying to influence the basic idea behind the Venus Project. So another reason is, as Jacques already mentioned, that if we release parts of our products into the domain of open source, the risk is too high that parts of it are actually taken and either changed in appearance or changed something in the source and then taken to make profit of it. Or on the other hand, take it, change it a bit and patent it and keep us from using it. So there is ultimately at the moment no point that I can see where open source can contribute to the Venus project.
There are many people that have already taken our pictures and designed and tried to raise money for their own direction utilizing our information. Did you know that? These decisions that I make are not based on my personal feelings. They're based on what people do with the information we give them. They do not necessarily support the Venus Project. Without mentioning the Venus Project, they use our pictures, inventions, recommendations to raise funds for some development of their own.
Also, we had somebody here from one of the lectures from the Pentagon. They just happened to drive somebody here, but he really liked it. And he was adamant, telling us not to put things out because they have a department that he worked in the Pentagon, in the government, that just takes different designs, which they have in most industries, and turns them around, and then they patent them. But did you want to go on with some more things, Ben? That's excellent what you're talking about. Absolutely correct.
Yeah, just again picking up what's been written down in the chat. A license is something that is actually bound to laws. And how can you ensure that a law is actually be taken into credit or taken into account? You cannot keep someone who is really willing to take something away from you to just limit them by laws. So no matter what license I can put on any product that is done by the Venus Project, that doesn't keep you from taking it, changing it so that it is not recognized as part of the Venus Project, so there is no way of suing them.
And even if you're in the right and you try and sue someone, doesn't mean you're going to be successful at that. Depends on how good your lawyer is and how educated the jury is, or uneducated.
I was going to say another issue on this that's commonly misunderstood, and we get this with the Corson project, for example, is people say, well, why can't we have certain things of the Venus project that are open source or freely available to everybody? The Venus project is a complete system, just like your body is a complete system. If you took away your lungs and your heart and your brain, your legs and your arms wouldn't move around, and you wouldn't go to work, and you wouldn't be able to eat and things like that because your body wouldn't function. The Venus project is exactly like that. You can't break it up into parts. You can't take away the Corson and run that as an open source project and expect to get the results of the Venus project in a resource-based economy. It's a total system, a total redesign of our culture, and it has to work as a system. So, we want to protect as much as possible everything of all the designs in the Venus project, so that when we come to actually implement a resource-based economy or even a test city, that we can do so without having to go through the problems of trying to prove that we came up with the concept first and someone else stolen the designs and painted in them and things like this. We don't want to go through all of that. We want to be able to do this as and when we're able to do it. And I think if you're really serious about wanting to live in a resource-based economy as defined by the Venus Project, and it's not an ego issue that it's something that you want to do things your way or whatever, if that's your end goal, then I can't see why you'd have a problem with it personally.
Did you want to say something? Go ahead.
Yes, we do have an open system. We do have a lot of people submitting ideas to the Venus Project, but 99% of the ideas have already been worked out. They think they're submitting new suggestions, but I've been at it for many years, and the suggestions that most people make are very old ideas. Very few people come up with very new methods of doing things. In other words, they say, I'd like to submit a suggestion. This is wonderful. We welcome submission of all kinds of suggestions. This is how we grow. There's nothing the matter with making suggestions, and do that continuously. That's what we mean by an open system. We welcome suggestions, but just remember that you always think your own suggestion is brand new, and that remains to be checked out.
I wanted to go back to this page that Peter had in terms of question 8 about the history of the Zeitgeist movement. The last paragraph, he mentions, out of general respect to the Venus Project's work with what is considered to be the proprietary notion of a resource-based economy and its definition, the Zeitgeist movement adapted to the term resource-based economic model to separate the fresco specific association definition and allow more flexible general understanding of the premise. It's really amazing to me that what Peter is really doing is taking certain aspects of the resource-based economy and saying out of respect he's going to put his own name onto it. I don't consider that respect, I consider that more arrogance. Did you want to say?
Yes, I would say that changing the words so that you talk about the same thing, but making it appear as though it's a work, the long-term laborious work of the Zeitgeist movement. The Zeitgeist movement had nothing to offer when I met them, no approach to how to deal with any aspect of the culture, from transportation, education, construction of cities, nothing. They had nothing to offer except point out the shortcomings of the present society. And if they wish to work with the Venus Project, that means you share ideas, you meet together and discuss films and approaches. You don't go off in your own direction. If everybody goes off in their own direction, you're going to have the same limitations of culture that you have today.
May I just add to this?
Certainly.
So this is basically a perfect example of what I was just stating in regards to open source. Here it is only an idea, not a product, but actually the idea has been taken and changed, and now they claim it's their idea. And this is exactly what I was actually saying about the open source, taking our products and make profit of it, or claim it's yours.
Yes, that's true.
I'll add to that as well. We've got someone in the chat room who's sort of debating this. Look at it this way. Jacques worked on this for 75 years. He fully understands the developments that he's worked on and the conclusions that he's arrived at through his experience working in the various fields of human behaviour, human values, environmental concern, social systems, city designs, etc., etc., etc. Peter Joseph, to be blunt, is a musician and a filmmaker, a bloody good filmmaker. If it wasn't for Peter's film, I wouldn't have found out about the Venus Project. And the work that he done with the movement was great. Unfortunately, he's now gone off in a direction that isn't the Venus Project. It's his interpretation of the Venus Project. The problem with that is when you haven't got the background to back that up, is that you're now deceiving people into believing that you're the person that has all the answers, you know how to implement this system that you've designed, which you haven't. And that's the real issue with going around saying, taking credit for other people's work. If it's just a single thing and no one else is involved, it's not a major problem. But as soon as you start involving other people, you're now deceiving them into believing that you're the one that can implement that. And the fact is that he just doesn't have the background to be able to do that. If he was working in the same direction, he'd be working with the Venus Project. He's clearly not. So he obviously feels there's something in what he's doing that is different to the Venus Project, and therefore that's why he can't work with Jacques and cooperate.
Thanks, Andrew. Are there any other questions? Go ahead.
A lot of people think that I'm the dictator of the project. What I want you to understand is that Peter Joseph said to me, he will utilize the Zeitgeist movement as the activist arm of the Venus Project. He never shared his motion picture with me. He never shared his presentations with me. To work together is the only way to accomplish the Venus Project. But if you go off in your own direction and say, well, I have enough knowledge about it to make a motion picture, Jock. I'd like to make your motion picture, but I'll do it myself because I work better alone. I don't know what he's talking about. He never shared his ideas with me.
Well, to clarify that comment, Jacques, after Zeitgeist moving forward, Peter said he was going to do another film, and do a low-budget film of Jacques' movie that he's been talking about wanting to do for decades. And I said to him, well, that would be, he wanted to do it, take it from Jacques' book, Looking Forward, and I said, well, that would be wonderful. He wanted to do it taking place in a resource-based economy, and I said, Peter, that'd be wonderful. The person you really should work with is Jacques, because he knows what that would be best than anyone else. And some of his comments were, well, I work better alone. So that's when we thought, well, we really better get this done and start working on the film to really have it represent what it's supposed to represent. I don't know if I've talked about that before, but that's how that came about. And there, well, okay.
This is not unusual. It's happened with many organizations. People go off in different directions based on their interpretation. That's why one of the major problems of society today is the language. It's subject to interpretation. And that's a problem we have to deal with. It's quite real.
Just one other thing on the, I just want to say something about the transition actually. Many people sort of come along and say, why do we try and protect Jacques' designs? Why don't we go open source? Why don't we share everything? Why don't we work without money? That's another common one. You've got to try and understand that we live in a system, and that system is our environment. That environment has certain rules, certain guidelines, certain structure, certain restrictions that you can't evade. It's a bit like saying, okay, I'm going to evade breathing because I don't agree with it. I don't want to do it anymore. If I did that, I'd die. In this system, if you don't sell your labor or sell a product or do something that brings you in money, how do you live inside of a monetary system without money when there's things like taxes that you have to pay? Even if you're completely off grid, you still have to pay land taxes. You still have to pay things like for your water. You still have to pay things like telecoms, communications stuff, because you can't be off grid with that kind of stuff, not very easily. There's probably only a handful of people on the planet that can actually do that live in capitalist countries. So we are restricted by our environment, and you're not able to completely evade that. So when it comes to things like the transition, this is why we don't advocate a replacement of the monetary system. We're advocating a transition out of the monetary system, which means that we're actually going to have to work within the monetary system to a certain degree to be able to get the resources and the ability to actually build the first cities and develop a global resource-based economy. The biggest part of all of this is actually getting to the people and getting them to understand this direction and actually want this direction, so that eventually we can come to a consensus globally that will allow us to declare all of the Earth's resources as the shared common heritage of all man, and then work towards a global resource-based economy.
Right, just in addition to that, the Venus Project is not fighting the current monetary system, but instead wants to establish a new system that is evolving out of the monetary system, and therefore render the monetary system obsolete.
Yes, that's true. The system is rendering itself obsolete. It won't be much longer, we don't think.
I agree with that. I think it's happening all over the world. The system is unable to operate, unable to provide solutions to many of the problems. They don't really provide solutions, but they do provide solutions for the existence of the established order. And that's all they're concerned with, the bottom line called profit. And that's the major cause of most human problems. The lack of initiative to develop a system to enhance the lives of everyone rather than a selected few. I said this before, there's no elitism, technical or otherwise, in the Venus Project. All people have access to whatever needs they have, just like the public library. I've said this time and time again. That's how the distribution system works, like the public library. You have access to musical instruments, books, videotapes on any subject you're interested in, a lot like the internet, which is the greatest liberator ever developed.
Roxanne, we've got some questions now in your chat box at the bottom.
Okay. How do you intend to appeal to the largely superstitious public, specifically the religious agenda? Can a transition period be achieved easier if appeals are made to reasoning methods
You have
first?
to, words like reasoning is good, but you
They're not
have to
reasonable.
expose people to the methods of evaluation utilized by science. And they're closer, much closer than those by theologians. If you expose people to scientific methods of evaluation, how they arrive at decisions, how scientists make decisions, how the theory of evolution was developed, rather than saying God made the world and then he rested. All this sort of stuff is so elementary, so childish, that it has to do with human insecurity. And once you understand that, you have to look for reasons in nature. Now, nature does write its own history, but we don't know how to read it yet. Some people have learned how to read the life of a tree by the rings in a tree. They know how old a tree is by the amount of rings. They can tell when droughts occurred or when there were floods by the thickness of the rings of the trees. Nature does write its own autograph. It's just a question of time when we learn how to read it. In the geological layers of the earth, you have evidence of social evolution. You have evidence of human evolution. You have a great deal of evidence that plants of 1 million years ago were different than the plants of today, that all nature changes. You have that evidence buried in the strata beneath you. Whereas religion just bases it on some story told by people that claim that they talk with God. Why don't they ask God what makes cancer, what makes heart disease? When you talk to God, what do you talk about? Your family? Or do you ask questions?
Yeah, people talk about evolution as a theory. It's a fact when they look at the skulls and the plant life in the past. Those are no theories. How will people be punished for an offense like vandalism or manslaughter?
That's only in a scarcity society where you have limited access. When people have access to any kind of book that they want at the public library, there's no need to steal the book. If they steal the book, they lose their library card. I'm sure you know that. But most people do not. They return the books to the library. That goes for musical instruments. As long as you want to use that instrument, you're welcome to keep it as long as you have to. But when you get through using it, you learn how to play it, you then return it to the library, the music library. When you want information in chemistry, you go to areas of the library and access chemicals to do whatever experiments you want to if you've learned the process. But if you haven't learned the process, you're really not qualified to do experiments. In other words, if a person wants to build a new kind of airplane that's never been tested, then he cannot fly it over cities. He'd have to fly it over designated areas, like the ocean, areas like that, if it's a new type of airplane. We cannot afford to have him, a person that wants to make his own type of airplane, fly over cities and endanger the lives of others. This is our major concern.
I'm going to skip some here and I'll try and come back to the others if I have time. When I visited the Venus Project in Florida, the site didn't seem to be self-sustainable. It seems Jacques and Roxanne didn't have their own water system, their own electricity power. Electricity power. Why are they living traditionally? Why haven't they transformed their home into self-sustainable to eliminate cost and resources? Let me take this first, if you don't mind. All the time that we've been here, for which is about 30 years, we had very limited resources. We had no outside funding from anyone. I had a full-time business that primarily financed this place with Jacques' lectures and selling the books too. We printed our own books, cost us thousands, almost $100,000 to print the books all the times we printed them. We couldn't get a publishing house to pick it up. We paid for everything. We had kind of a choice, I say that in quotes, to either become self-sufficient, which we could have done. We could have lived to ourselves, become self-sufficient. Jacques had hundreds of different designs to become self-sufficient, solar and other methods that haven't been tried before that I was dying to put into the designs, but we couldn't afford to do that. What we did with our funding was build models, make books, make videos, to put the information out there, to document the information, to buy editing machines and cameras. It took us many, many years before we could even get proper lighting. But when we did get donations for the first time after Zeitgeist's Addendum came out, we put it all into editing systems so we can make more material and get it out there. So we don't have that much money. And since I lost my business because of the mortgage crisis, like everybody else around here, it had something to, I did architectural renderings and models for outside businesses. So it had to do with real estate, which totally crashed in Florida. So with the limited funds, we're still trying to get information out there. It's very expensive to go to solar or anything like that. And we just, whenever we had our next funding, we didn't borrow money from the banks. We never did that. We just put it in to making another portion for the buildings. That's why the buildings are very small as well. They're not lavish at all. The grounds are beautiful. That was always important to us, but we never bought a plant that was more than $5. We've been here for 30 years and they've grown and it looks lush and beautiful. I always mention Jacques did the cement work for all the buildings. I mixed it in a wheelbarrow and troweled it on. Jacques made over 400 models here. So our money went towards getting this information out there.
Rather than building photovoltaic systems, which would cost decided to publish books, make videotapes to get information out to public, not to sustain our little research center.
Now, if we were to do it again, a lot of people say, well, why don't we get together and do like a egalitarian type of society and people grow their own food. We're not really interested in starting a little hand-tooled community. It would have to be a community where we can do those things and do them well and build better buildings and build more equipment and able to sustain more people to go right to work directly. It took us 30 years to build this ourselves and make all the displays. And to go through that again with very little financing, it makes no sense unless we had a great deal of financing so we could make a better research center and enable more people to come here and work with us and turn out more products so the public would know what this system is about. There's a question here, how about an ongoing dialogue with the Zeitgeist movement? Would that be necessary?
It only would be necessary if you have questions that you pose or suggestions that you make to improve the operation of the Venus Project or a resource-based economy.
You're talking about having a dialogue with the Zeitgeist movement. Is that what you...
I just answered.
Okay, referred to that. Yeah, we're not open to not talking to people who are interested in the Zeitgeist movement. I think a lot of the chapters are still the Zeitgeist movement and the Venus Project. We're not stopping that.
Got a question for you. What is the process of getting people who do not embrace your values or reasoning methods to engage in the process of changing those values? The TVP group that focuses on this issue is the group I want to be a part of, but I can't find that group. Does it exist? A pre-transition effort maybe. I'll quickly jump on that actually. We do have, if you look on the website under Get Involved, we have a series of teams split up into 3 categories. We have TVP Core, which work on things like funding, writing teams for blogs and for things like the TVP magazine, which we're working on, all promotional aspects. We have the marketing team, which work on promotional advertising and marketing of the Venus Project's ideas to the world, as well as media contacts and things like that. So that's the core. We have the TVP design projects, which are mainly aimed at the moment of simulating a resource-based economy as Jacques designed it, and basically, showing that as visual renders and stuff for people to get a feel of what it would look like to be in these cities. We're also working on things like IT and other stuff in TVP design. And then on the TVP support side of things, we've got the media team, Expression of Media, which they make lots of sort of support videos and stuff about the Venus project, and they get posted at the internet. And then we have the TVP activism teams. Now that's where you actually get involved with other people in your community or in your local area, country, etc., and work on developing ideas for promoting this idea in your country, etc. So we'd definitely recommend signing up for some of those teams and get involved. We need all the help we can get.
Somebody is asking here if the Venus Project is willing to contact other organizations to see if they would be interested in assisting the Venus Project, such as open source. Yes, the people in our media team and Jack and I have always been working at trying to contact other organizations. Julita just finished a beautiful press kit that we're going to be using to send out to media and to other organizations. You can see that there are other organizations that do support us on our website, and we are always trying to reach out to them. And that's what the brochure is about too, that was done. There's a comment here that technically they only need to pay land tax, everything else is obtained without cost. I don't know what that statement is about. That's absolutely ridiculous. Living costs are very high, from medical bills to food to all the materials we need to continue to make our videos and get this out to the public. Our internet bill is just to have internet here because we're way out in the country is outrageous. I have, medical bills you don't get. Most people that are here don't have insurance. I don't know what they're talking about.
Roxanne, could you just quickly, briefly go over what happened with the original group that you were involved with when buying the land for the Venus project, etc.? Someone's asking.
That was socio-cyberneering. They're asking about what happened with the land. Well, you can hear the lectures to a lot of the people that kept coming back to Jacques' lectures in the 70s and 80s. They're great. They're the classic lecture tours that we give out, and a lot of those people wanted to buy land and do something together. So, a lot of times when you have a group of people, it narrows down to just very few who are actually doers. The people did eventually put in enough funds to purchase 40 acres of land in Naples, Florida. And today that's one of the highest acreage, money per acre lands that there is in the United States. I mean, I don't know about today, but before the mortgage crisis hit. But it wasn't back then. So we purchased 40 acres of land, and we had monthly payments, and it needed everybody to continue making their payments in order to keep the land. Well, very shortly after that, the people stopped making payments. They said, oh, that'll never happen. The zoning board won't go along with it. Whatever they said, they stopped making their payments. And actually, after they stopped making the payments, Jacques went to the zoning board and said, can we have about 15 minutes with you? The head of the zoning board gave him an hour, and halfway through the conversation, he said, can I join this organization? Is there anything you need that I can help you with? And at that time, it all fell apart. Jacques just wanted to see if they really would go along with him. And we had to tell him that we had no more organization left. The people cut out on their payments. Luckily, Jacques had lawyers and judges that used to come to his lectures. The lawyers would come and they'd bring other lawyers and they'd say to Jacques, give him hell. And he used to have several lawyers coming. But anyhow, one of the lawyers lent us the money. He picked up the payments for the monthly payments. Otherwise, we would have just had to let it go. He picked it up until we could sell that land. And we did sell that land. And we didn't make any money on it. We just sold it for what we bought it for. And then Jacques sold his house and we bought this land in Venus. Okay, I guess that's about it with the questions, unless anybody else has anything else. Okay, we thank everybody for the conversation today and the questions.
Yes, thanks for the opportunity, and thank you for your questions. But don't hesitate to ask questions continuously if there's anything you don't understand. And also say that if I don't answer your question, show me where I've missed and rephrase the question. Maybe I didn't understand it as you meant it. So please don't stop asking questions.
And thank you, everyone, for the tremendous help that you're doing and the tremendous work you're doing to help see this come about. I don't want to say helping us, because I know it's your own position now that you want to help this direction and live in a resource-based economy. So we really appreciate working with you. And we'll see you next week.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone as well. It's great to see so many people in here each weekend, and it seems to be growing, which is fantastic. Really appreciate all the work everyone's putting into the teams to get them up and running. As you know, we're only 5 months old as far as the whole global team system and stuff is concerned, so I think we're doing really well. Just a couple of calls on the various teams. We need help on everything. So if you're in a TVP activism team, please don't think that that's the only place you can go. You know, you can join as many teams as you like or have time to contribute to. The only restrictions are those on the TVP design teams, because we don't have time to train people up for 3 years to do 3D, for example. So we do require that people who join those teams have the required skills sets and stuff to contribute on those projects. But things like TVP writing, things like the study groups, things like the magazine, the marketing team, media contacts team, expressionist team, etc. You know, they all need help with their projects. And the more we can get on that, the better we can get these projects out there and get the Venus project out there as much as possible. Because at the end of the day, we're not doing this for Jack and Roxanne, we're doing this for our own futures. We all see the benefits of living in a resource-based economy. We all want to live in that. And the goal has to be the same. If the goal is the same, then we shouldn't have too much problems getting there, as long as we all work on sort of, developing the projects to sort of get there. So thanks everyone.